County.
Hello and welcome to the special edition COVID-19 Rogers TV program dedicated to informing you, our community, of the resources and services available to you during this pandemic. My name is Carol Merton, and for those of you who normally watch the program, you know that before I introduce our guests, I like to say a few words of thank you. In the past, I've certainly expressed our thank you to our Medical Officer of Health, Public Health Unit, frontline workers, cashiers, delivery truck drivers, and so many more. But today I'd like to read an excerpt from a letter that was written by an author, Alison Wines. This letter was sent to Francesca Dobbin, who is the Executive Director, United Way, Bruce and Gray, and she kindly shared it with me. So I want to read a few paragraphs and then add a few comments at the very end. So here it is. There is an invisible group of people who aren't being recognized, who are working intensely to keep the world turning, to make sure that those on the front lines have the support that they need, and those at home have something to go back to when we get to the other side of this. Who are you? You're accountants and bankers, restructuring finances and debt to help small businesses stay afloat. Your trade managers negotiating frantically to get hand sanitizer and face masks into the country. Your consultants supporting clients through massive changes, unsure if you'll get paid for the work that you do when it's all over, but doing it anyway because it matters. Your communicators trying to find the words to explain a crisis the likes of which we have never seen, to your organization staff, and to the community. You are trying to do this while homeschooling your kids, with babies that won't stop crying during conference calls, while feeling anxious about elderly patients in nursing homes and your parents. Maybe no one is putting signs in their window for accountants and administrators, but what you do matters, because you are holding a place for the world to return to normal. My words to you are this: you are not invisible. We thank you for your dedication and commitment to our community. Our message back to you is this: your contributions are sincerely and most heartfelt appreciated. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for what you continue to do. And on that note, I want to thank and welcome two of my guests who are going to be discussing climate, because climate impacts us all, even in a COVID-19 crisis. So I want to welcome two guests, Danielle Valiquette and also Rick Logtenberg. Did I come close, Rick? I hope.
You got it that time.
Rick is actually Skyping in from British Columbia, which, wow, is just absolutely delightful. And Danielle, of course, is here in close by, Skyping in as well. And I'm wondering, before we get to Climate Caucus and climate change initiatives, I'm wondering if each of the guests would mind telling us a little bit more about themselves, what they do, and what prompted them to get interested in a Climate Caucus. I understand that Rick is actually the founder of this caucus, so I'll be very, very interested in how this came to be. Who'd like to go first?
Danielle, you're closer.
Sure. I win, right? So my name is Danielle Valiquette. I am a councillor in the lovely Grey Highlands of Grey County, and I have been a councillor for about 18 months now. This is my first term, and your thank you is so lovely, and I just want to do a quick shout out to all the vets and the feed stores that are also one of those unsung heroes of the farming community and people who keep livestock and animals. So I do have a small 50-acre little homestead here in Grey Highlands. But I heard about Rick through a colleague, simply because I was in the process of working towards declaring a climate crisis with my council. And through a colleague, I heard about the Climate Caucus. And I was on a bit of a personal timeline as I was about to take a personal leave of absence because I did run in the last federal election. So I was trying to, quite frankly, get a climate crisis in before I left. And so I was able to utilize the resources that were available at that time, which have just exploded since then. So that is how I came to the Climate Caucus from, I guess, a really naive perspective to watching what it's become today.
Excellent. Rick, how about you?
So I'm a new councillor as well, actually. My background is in software. I have a few software companies, and however, I've been concerned about climate change, I think, like a lot of us, and the environment in general for years, and have been working as a volunteer in my local community, and then nationally with an organization, with a number of organizations across the country, including the Citizens Climate Lobby. And when having worked at the federal level a little bit, I recognize that so much of the action in terms of preserving our climate, in terms of preserving our local environments, happen at the local level. And local governments play an important role in addressing the climate emergency. And in particular, local governments not only play an important role because they impact quite a bit of the country's emissions, but they also have the ability to innovate really quickly and do interesting things that the federal government isn't able to do. So, having seen that and seen my own community do some really good stuff, I thought if we could share what, say, the City of Nelson is doing with other communities around the country, then together we could move forward quicker on addressing this important emergency. And so I ran as a councillor, and then ran to become a councillor and won. And then from there started organizing pretty much right away to connect with other councillors and mayors across the country. And very quickly, I found a number of others like me, like Danielle, who are so concerned that this is the issue of our time and that we need to address it quickly. And so we started connecting and just sort of using the internet and the tools that were available to us to build a national network very quickly with very little resources and start to have an impact. And so from that, we hosted a national summit last year and brought in national leaders as well as experts from around the country and began working on really concrete and specific issues. So it's really the reason why I'm doing this is because I feel that this is the issue of our time and this is the way to do it.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about the caucus itself. How many people are involved? Is every province represented on the caucus? How does it work?
Okay. So Climate Caucus is a national network. So we do have mayors and councillors from across the country, every province and territory. We're about 280 registered mayors and councillors now. And then we have allies who are part of Climate Caucus as well. And those are sort of academics and experts, even community volunteers and community organizers who support the councillors and mayors with the information, with the ideas that they need to put forward and be more effective in their own councils, but also as a national network. And so we have in total about 900 members So again, about 280 mayors and councillors, and then about 600 and some supporting allies.
So I read that you have a call for a green and just recovery. I read that phrase and I thought that was quite interesting. Can you expand a little bit on what that means and then what some of your measurable targets are that you're striving for?
Yeah, sure. So federally, as we all know, the federal government is responding to the COVID crisis with quite a bit of stimulus investment or stimulus support that's meant to help support the economy as it is, but ideally also help rebuild the economy to be more resilient in the face of future shocks like this. And, you know, the immediate response, and as politicians, I think we probably can all attest to this, that we're often dealing with a lot of issues just to keep sort of the ship, you know, going in the right direction, just to keep the wheels on the train, as it were, I guess. And so often we get distracted by responding to the individual small crises. And so rather than, you know, take this opportunity to rebuild our economy in a way that's going to make it stronger, sometimes we just rebuild what was before that and just sort of reinforce the things that caused the problem in the first place. And it's a natural and understandable tendency. So what Climate Caucus is really advocating the federal government do, and trying to create the political space for them to do it, is rebuild the economy and target those investments back into the economy in a way that will make us stronger for the future. And when we think about what that future is going to be like, this COVID crisis gives us an early preview of future shocks from climate change. That's probably, well, almost certainly the biggest set of crises that we're going to face as a country. And so we've had a chance to sort of see what a crisis looks like at the national level and an international crisis and what role Canada plays in that. And that gives us a chance to retool and rebuild for crises that will be similar.
And sorry, if I could add, one of the asks is that the federal government and of course the provincial government, we're funded by both, that we change the way municipalities are funded. Right now, we are funded essentially by growth, and so we're funded by development charges. We receive money from the gas tax, which obviously we would like to change, as well as municipal taxes. So in order for municipalities to be able to move forward, we need to change essentially how we do everything and how we fund municipalities.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now tell me, Danielle, were you successful in getting your climate emergency declared?
I was. So Graham, I'm a very, very lucky councillor. I sit around the table with 6 other forward-thinking individuals. My original resolution was to create climate emergency, and we did settle on crisis. But one of the best thing that that fell out of that is that it was a sort of a 2-piece resolution in which we also created, a climate task force, and so that involves 2 members of council, one of which is me, and 5 members of our community, and it has been amazing. We have, we have been able to start to create some of those metrics and some of those measurements moving forward that will be required. We've also been able to celebrate a little bit of what has already been done by the community that the public didn't necessarily know about. And other thing that happened from a staff perspective, and again, I have to just talk about how wonderful the staff is at Greyhound, because it was immediate. They were on it. The changes that occurred.
Wow.
From small changes as to, a significant decrease in printing, across the board, including invoices that were done for water, et cetera, to much larger ones like purchasing electric vehicles. So some people are concerned that by declaring a climate crisis that there's no action associated, it's just platitude, et cetera. And that has not been my experience at all, and nor mostly with other counselors that I speak with. It was the catalyst to, in many ways.
So what you're describing is that as a result of the declaration, you were able to put action behind the words, that it wasn't the phrase, but there was action. What would you suggest? I mean, certainly municipalities are like creatures of their own being, and they all have their cultures, I think. What would you suggest, or how would you suggest municipalities go forward to consider, whether you call it a climate crisis, emergency, climate urgency? How would you convince a municipality to consider taking that next step forward? Because everyone does it at different paces and spaces. What would be the selling points?
Sure. So the first thing I would do, if any counselor who is trying to go down this path, is to go to the resources on the climate caucus. And in one of my, I was actually just rereading one of the resources. I think that was one of the first things to come out of everything that's out there. And it talks about working with your counselors. So this is not something you drop on them, when they don't know about it until they read the draft agenda. This is something that you work with your council, you help them understand, what it is that you're trying, what it is you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it. And, I often find, though, of course, this isn't everyone's, but I often find when you start to talk about the savings that can be associated with a lot of the initiatives, then you start getting some listening from people who, might not have been your ally before.
Mm-hmm. Now, as new counselors, do you think in the future that there would be some information orientation to new counselors? Are you aware that across Canada there is a caucus around climate? Because certainly this was interesting for me when I looked it up and I saw all the pictures of all the different people, and I thought I was aware of initiatives locally, but I honestly was not aware of the climate caucus. And it was really helpful to see that there are others who are thinking that they might like to be involved. What would you suggest?
Well, Climate Caucus is definitely going to be ready for the next election to help new councillors and mayors be welcomed into the climate community, as it were, and provide quite a bit of the training and the services to be effective, like Danielle said, to know how to work with your council to, be more ambitious. And even how to speak to not just your other councillors, but to senior staff and then to the community about why taking action on climate change is got so many other benefits. It's not just about reducing emissions, although that's absolutely essential. It is also about investing, say, in the restoration of the local ecosystem, because the local forests and watersheds provide a lot of services to the community that we often don't account for. We call it green infrastructure, but rather than, say, spending tens of millions of dollars on new water and sewage systems, you may find that the ecosystem, when it's properly supported, provides a lot of that those services already. And it just needs to be, like I said, supported. And then the cost savings that come with that are really significant. And then, you're talking about efficient buildings that reduce less emissions, also cost less, have a longer lifespan. And so over and over again, when you look at taking action on climate within your municipality, you're going to find that the number of co-benefits that come with it are really dramatic. And so once we start to understand that, it gets a lot easier to move ahead.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite examples, largely probably because it relates to a rural community as well, is if we could have municipalities supporting things like hedgerows. And so we're helping farmers with soil quality. We are sequestering carbon. And lastly, we are putting barriers so that snow is not blowing across our highways and becoming, quite frankly, a life hazard, and we've all driven that, right? So I think there's so many examples that that can really grab people, and then they start to think of and then we can do this, and then we can do that.
Yeah. So the messaging for municipalities, because you mentioned provincially and federally, the caucus wants to send messages. What would be the difference in a messaging to the municipality or a rural environment versus urban and then to provincial and federal governments? How would the caucus approach the messaging? What difference would you use, if any?
Well, I can suggest a couple of things, and then Danielle, you can check me on it. Well, in urban settings, one of the big things that we're looking for is support for transit. With the COVID crisis, a lot of the fares, taking fares has been, either the ridership is down or it's been difficult to take fares. So rather than come through the front door where you put your money into the fare machine, whatever it's called, you have to go through the back, and so they lose that fare revenue, and it really puts a stress on the transit system. And so one of the things we're asking the federal government is really look at supporting transit at this time. Again, because that system is so important to the most vulnerable, it's also really important to our service industry as it comes back from the crisis. If we don't have an effective transit system, we undermine the economy in all sorts of ways that we're only just starting to realize. In the rural context, again, speaking about supporting the local ecosystems is one crucial thing. In British Columbia, or in Northern Ontario, where I grew up actually, we have a real concern with wildfires. And by really working on the wildland interface, so the forest interface with the city, doing more sustainable forestry and some wildfire mitigation work there, we can not only sequester more carbon in a healthier forest and prevent wildfires, which are dangerous in their own respect, but also are a source of additional carbon emissions. If we can really work in supporting that, we can do a lot in the rural context. So those are just two examples. But Danielle, I imagine you have more ideas on that.
Yeah. And well, just, from a rural perspective, transit is important. If you are a vulnerable member of our community and you live in Hanover, but the support you need is in Dundalk, for example, we still require those same things, but we do have to think about them slightly different and slightly a little bit more out of the box versus what you could do by electrifying transit, for example, in Owen Sound, which would be I won't say an easy thing to do, but easier than some of our rural communities. But I think there's wins there too. One of the huge things that we see in Grey County is, of course, tourism associated with cycling, right? So I really think that municipalities even rural municipalities can be bettered by improving our roads. So not only to widen for cyclists, but also it's a safety concern for our Mennonite community as well. And I think sometimes that's forgotten.
For sure. Now, the Climate Caucus, if people are interested in joining, is there a fee to join? Do they just connect with somebody? How does it work?
Well, you can go to climatecaucus.ca and then click the join button. And then there's a process that you would go through. It's quite simple, but it helps us to understand how you might fit within the network, and then we have regular conference calls that are generally open to everybody, all members. And so you can get some of our most active volunteers just came out of nowhere and stepped up. And that's the thing we're trying to really encourage is we don't know where the best ideas are going to come from. We don't know who's got the time and the energy to really be most productive. So we've created a system that allows as many people to get involved as possible.
So you have weekly teleconferences. Sorry, Danielle, I interrupted you. Did you want to?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add that one of my favorite things about the Climate Caucus is that I personally have been able to pop in and out, if you will, depending on what my external time requirements are. So, we're all busy people, and like Rick said, sometimes the outside stuff intrudes with what we're trying to do. But what's great is that, you can attend a meeting. Maybe you haven't been in a meeting for 3 weeks kind of thing, but you always walk away feeling better. You walk away feeling more energized, and then even when I popped into to look at some information the other night, the overwhelming speed and the resources that are out there already, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, is really lovely.
Great.
So it's not a requirement where you're on a conference call necessarily, or you're giving 35 hours a week.
But you can be there or not be there.
Yeah.
And I can't believe our time is up already. I want to thank both of you very much for joining me today to talk about the Climate Caucus. And thank you to our viewing audience for tuning in and watching the special edition COVID-19 program on Rogers TV. Take care, stay safe, care for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Well done.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. This is Rogers TV, Grey County.
You're invited to join us on the couch, first Tuesday of the month for the 5th anniversary season of your loved local LGBTQ talk show.
Your mouth can do a lot of amazing things.